Hi, welcome to Art Insider. I'm Aprajita Jain and today we focus on the art institutions of our country. Of course, museums stand on the top of the food chain and are often funded and founded by governments, either on a state level or on the national level. A nation needs a museum not only to act as a preserver of its culture, but also to educate its public about its history. It acts as a repository of its creative minds. Our first guest on the show today is Professor Rajiv Lochan, who has been the director of the National Gallery of Modern Art for the last 16 years. Dr. Lochan, thank you so much for being a part of our show and accepting to talk to us. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey over 16 years?
Well, that's a very tall question to answer in the little time that we have. Well, I'll begin by saying I was a practicing artist. I'm still one, except that it has taken back seat. I was an academician. So I was the other side of the fence. And taking up the responsibility of being at the National Gallery of Modern Art allowed me to deal with issues that I was theoretically involved with, deal with works of art, in their physicality, and organize exhibitions not only with the historical perspective, but to ensure that the language and the transformation of the language in the context of this country, the way it has evolved pertinent to this land and pertinent to the ethos of this country, the way it has transformed itself to amalgamate and be contemporary. So that's the long journey that I had to address in a scenario where tradition on one side and contemporaneity and modernity on the other were major issues to be able to be shared with the common masses, because not to forget that we are called a National Gallery of Modern Art, but we are a museum.
Once you told me that to come to contemporary, I have to show the past. And like we were discussing, we're building on the past. Can you tell us a little bit about your 3 favorite exhibitions that you've done here?
Well, 3 is a very difficult question to answer. The earlier part is easier.
Right.
You see, I indirectly mentioned this in my earlier statements, that in a country that had not celebrated its own artists,
Yes.
who had spent a lifetime in establishing what we understand as truly modern Indian art, after Picasso, I had to formulate a system and a balance between showcasing them and honoring them with retrospectives. And that's what we did. K.G. Subramanian, Satish Gujral, Nandlal Bose.
But museums can be started by private individuals too. To understand a little bit more about this model, we speak to Mrs. Kiran Nadar, who started her museum, KNMA, in 2010. The focus of her museum is 20th century art of South Asia till its present times. We speak to her about her vision and all the challenges that it brings with it. We have on our show today somebody very, very special, somebody that I regard as almost a path breaker, Mrs. Kiran Nadar. Thank you very much for being a part of this show.
Thank you.
You were awarded by Forbes as being, you got a philanthropy award for it. Can you tell us a little bit about the journey from the inception of the idea to the physical space at Noida and then Saket, of course?
Well, the idea was germination in the mind. I had really no idea what a museum would entail or how I would go about it. Then I started talking to people and trying to figure out, but nowhere did I imagine the amount of work that needed to be put in. I think I might have been daunted if I had realized how much input was required. But once I decided that the museum was going to become a reality, I started collecting in more earnestness. I started looking for art which would fill my gaps on my collection. And my collection at that stage was quite honestly not very large. Today it seems that it was very large, but when I look back today, I mean as of now, to those days, it was a very nascent collection, which built over the next 5 years when the museum became a reality. So that journey was one of discovery and putting my roots down, so to speak, in this world of art, and then building on the collection as it was at that time.
So I want to come back to the idea of legacy building, and this is not only personal legacy, this is legacy for the country. So what are your thoughts about your role in safeguarding and promoting the country's legacy?
Well, I don't know if I thought of it quite like that when I started. I certainly thought that I would like to leave the museum for posterity, that it would supersede my lifetime and would be something to be there in the future for generations to come. Because I think India has a huge legacy of art and culture which extends hundreds of years earlier, and it's time that somebody took that forward. So that was a thought, but I don't know if it was as formulated as I'm saying today. Today I feel that the museum will be there for generations, and we will leave a legacy behind of Indian art which can be admired, and the museum will play a role to play in that.
So over the last few years, with the country, with galleries struggling, you've single-handedly kept a lot of them afloat. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, somebody has to play a role. Unfortunately, no other museums really came up. I thought we would be path breakers and that a lot of other people would follow our path and more museums would come up. That hasn't happened, but now there are some movements, and so maybe some other people will get into building museums and this legacy will grow, which I think is very important, because the state is not capable of doing everything, and in India there is just a couple of state-owned museums which are there, but the state isn't able to fulfill all its responsibilities. So I think the private sector has to pitch in and put in their inputs as well.
And so what's the future for the museum? What's keeping you completely excited in the next few years?
Is building the museum. We need to get on with building a dedicated museum space, and I hope that we will finalize the land very soon and then start the construction. I think in some way I am fulfilling an ambition by giving back to society, by building a museum which is going to be definitely larger than what it is today, and I hope I am able to fulfill that, and I think I am a happy person.
Thank you so very much. It's time for a short break, but when we're back, we'll be looking at new models for art institutions that have sprouted over the last 10 years. Welcome back to Art Insider. Our next guest is Mr. Ajay Piramal of the Piramal Art Museum. We speak to him about his views on building a collection as well as a program within the corporate context. Hi Mr. Piramal, thank you so much for agreeing to do this interview. In your opinion, what do you think is the role of art in perpetuating culture?
So art is culture. So in fact, you cannot have culture without art, as I look at it. And if I look at what the whole Indian tradition is and the whole history art has always played a very, very important space, and we've given importance to it. Whether you go to our temples, which were built thousands of years ago, you go to the Ellora, Ajanta caves, you find art everywhere, whether it's in sculpture, whether it's in murals, it's in painting. So it's so important to culture. And I think somewhere in the modern age, I think we seem to have forgotten it. In fact, you see, we used to not give till recently too much importance to all the valuable sculptures that we had, and that's why you saw that so many of them were stolen away, so many of their heads have been knocked off. And so I think, to answer your question, it is an integral part of culture. You can't separate the two. So one of the big things in the Art Foundation is the museum that we've started, and the museum is not only to exhibit our works, but to exhibit anybody who has good works and different themes. So today you said, you talked about moderns that we have done, but that's because that is just one area. We will put other artists, contemporary artists, and different types of art forms. We are hoping also that in the next exhibition we could get a Raja Ravi Verma show. So we would depend on other people giving us, loaning their art, so that more and more people can enjoy it and move it out from their drawing rooms into the public space. This is one part, that's the museum. In addition to that, we are also doing an art residency. Recently we called some young artists, get them to meet with senior artists, and then really guide them and let them produce some better quality of art. So that's another initiative. We're also having discussions on art, and we're also supporting an art management program. So over time that we want to increase the activities of the Art Foundation.
Thank you so very much, Mr. Piramal, for this. It's been a great insight, and we hope to see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Another institutional model is that of private individuals placing art in the public sphere. We speak to Sunita and Vijay Chiraria, collectors in their own right, who've placed massive amounts of art in their commercial projects. We speak to them about their newest project in Chennai. So first of all, thank you so very much, Sunita and Vijay, for allowing us to interview both of you. Thank you so much and welcome to the show. I know that you guys are very, very, very private, and this means a lot. We'd first like to ask you, when did you start buying art?
I think it was way back in 1993 when we sort of started just walking around the by-lanes of Colaba and found some galleries and then stumbled upon some more galleries. So it was more just stumbling that we started looking around for art.
So tell me now, I mean, there's one part of you guys that is this really amazing collectors. I would say one of the country's leading collectors. What made you guys add art in your mall? Phoenix.
You know, when you travel, you come across art in the most inadvertent of places. And maybe because we love art, the moment we see it, we spot it rather. It doesn't just pass by without us noticing it. And it gives us so much pleasure, and we get so excited. And like a little tiny Time Warner building on Columbus Circle in New York, and it has these two massive boteros in a tiny little lobby. And you're like, oh my God, it just works so well. It doesn't necessarily need.
Yeah. So I think when we were building this mall with Phoenix and in Chennai down south, and then suddenly we thought that this is a great opportunity for us to put art in a public space, because a mall is typically a public space. You've got nearly 40,000-50,000 visitors coming there every day. So at construction stage, just towards the end, literally, we said, let's put up art into this mall. And we thought, you don't want to put paintings because that clashes with the windows. So we picked up different mediums of art, from installations to sculptures to text art. So we created a platform for all of that, to video art. So we could dim the lights outside the elevators when you come out. That's the small lobby. That's the only place you could dim lights. So put video art there. and sound art when you enter elevators. So we picked up different mediums of art, and lots of installations and sculptures. And we were also very lucky because the art world really came out and supported us. The gallerist with the artist lent work to us. Some works we bought. So a combination of all of that put together, we have a large number of works.
Do you think that the viewers, the people interacting with these works in the malls, something has changed within them in the last few years?
I would imagine. I mean, I have this distinct vision of this young child walking out of the elevator in the mall, and he saw the video art playing, and he's tugging at his mom's hand and jumping and saying, "Oh my God, Mom, look." I mean, you know, those kind of, and then when you see somebody very earnestly reading the write-ups that we have written against the works, it's so heartwarming. And I think now they kind of accept it with pride that Chennai has it.
No, but it's definitely changed in some ways. But I think there's lots to be done. So we think of it as a museum. We have a curator and we have an international person who installs work for us. And we think of it as a museum when we're running the space. And now we're building the second mall. And it's exciting because we want to see what we can do and take it to a different level here.
Can you tell us a little bit about the next one?
It's the Palladium Mall, again in partnership with Phoenix. And it's adjoining. And here we thought we should bring in projection art, which is mapping and projection work by famous artists all over the world, including India. And we're actually installing projectors in locations which can map this. So it's going to be very interesting because it'll cut across the entire medium of various forms of art. And that's what's exciting. And of course, after this, we want to be running programs behind this, and it's only going to be the beginning from here for us.
Our next guest is Ms. Pooja Sood, who along with a group of artists started Khoj in 1997 as an international artists' residency. Khoj is the place where some of the country's most adventurous and experimental art is being produced. Peter spoke with Pooja about the parameters of Khoj and how it differentiates itself from museums.
So Pooja, can you explain to us the parameters of Khoj? What type of organization is it, and is it a museum?
Well, it's not a museum because we'd have no collections. We're also a not-for-profit, like several museums are, of course, but we're artist-led. We're also really like a lab, more like a laboratory, where artists are invited to develop their profession. So professional development is core, but artists are invited to experiment and push their practice and art making as far as possible. But I think over the years, with the kind of projects that we've been doing, it's also about questioning what art making can be, you know, where we're also pushing the question of contemporary art practice, and that it could be more than painting, sculpture, maybe installation, gaming, process-based work. So it's that kind of work which is a lot more ephemeral sometimes and a lot more process-based that we also support.
So you don't acquire works, there's no collection, and all the exhibitions are only temporary. And they come around. But the exhibitions really come out of the workshops, right? You invite artists here, usually combining Indian artists with international artists, and it's usually theme-based, right?
Well, when we started off, it was just a smaller format of the large workshops that we used to do in Modi Nagar, which continue to happen in different parts of India as catalysts for local art scenes. Here, we've been doing theme-based residencies now for some time, and yes, it is about what Indian artists are looking at, you know, and really trying to support that, but bringing in international voices to grow the understanding of a particular art form, art practice, etc. But we have open days, like a 6-week residency, which then ends in an open studio day, because we don't expect artists to make fantastic work within 6 weeks. What does happen in those 6 weeks is it's the beginning of a very good idea, and sometimes they manage to get some really good ideas out there, which then go on to develop into very good work. So as you know, Peter, over the years we've had so many artists who've done some of their most seminal work here and then gone on to grow it in fantastic ways.
Because I think actually the real plus point of Coj is it is, I mean, you've got rather traditional gallery spaces for the artist to work within and present the work, but at the same time, there's absolutely no market parameters. You don't expect to sell anything, nothing is expected, so it lets that artist have that freedom to really think out of the box.
Completely. And I think in any really sophisticated art scene, you do have the museum, the public sector, you have very good galleries, which are the economic part of it, and you have not-for-profits. And most artists move between all. You know, they get kind of supported across these platforms. And I think we lack public, you know, not-for-profit spaces like Coj across India, and we need to have many, many more, because that's where younger artists kind of cut their teeth into figuring out new things. Sometimes mid-career and older artists come back to try out a new idea, which they're supported with in terms of funding as well as space, and just a bunch of really creative people talking together all day and working together.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Art Insider. Join us next week for yet another episode where we discuss art and its artists.